I don't know why I'd be starting out of breath. Anyways, eat a sip. Had to increase my water bottle. Okay. Trying to see how exactly. I feel like I'm always out of breath. That can't be good. No, they're staring at me. Okay.
Is this thing on?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Subjective Podcast. I'm your host, Danielle, and today we have no special guests. It's just me, a little solo episode, and I have got to talk about these election results. Child, this is so ghetto. Now, by the time you're watching this, it is about 3 weeks post-election. And let me just say, I needed a minute to process. And I am still processing because obviously this is not the outcome that I had hoped for. And if you're watching this and you know me, that is very obvious. But if you just stumbled upon this podcast, by the end of this episode, you will be very clear on my stance, my beliefs, and how I feel politically. So, I don't have any positive outlook. I do not have words of encouragement. Baby, that is not what this episode is. I just want to talk about it. Now, this episode was always on the schedule. However, the plan that I had for this episode was very different, so I had to pivot. So we're just going to see how this goes. Now, I am stressed. So I have all of my little notes here, so I do not forget to touch on anything that I want to talk about. So if you see me looking down, just ignore that. But with that being said, all I can say is the results of this election are exactly what happens when a large group of people in this country collectively decide that they're going to choose hate and obviously not do any type of research to really understand what they were getting us into. So, with that being said, I feel like, in case it's not very obvious by the name of this podcast, everything that I'm going to talk about, everything that I'm going to say today is purely subjective. So it is based on my opinions, my feelings, my beliefs, my research. Now, I encourage you to not take anything I say as fact. I also encourage you to do your own research. And lastly, I don't encourage you to be in my comments trying to argue with me or change my opinion. I am, however, open to hearing other people's thoughts, opinions, whatever you say it with your chest. Cool. Now, let's just get into it. So, I want to reflect on the election and I want to talk about the results. I want to unpack and we'll just go with that. So, first, I just wanted to talk about because I think one of the things that I've noticed from being chronically online is that it seems to me that a lot of people didn't do their research. So, what I mean by that is they didn't do additional research on what the policies were for the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate. I don't think that they fully understood what a Donald Trump presidency would mean for the United States of America. And honestly, I think most people, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, which I do not do that often. So I'm going to say that they operated out of fear that was based around the economy only. Like, I think that is what was top of mind for most people. And so this election and the results of this election are far deeper than the economy. The first thing I can think of is voting rights, social justice. Donald Trump stood on stage and literally said, after this election, if you vote for me, you'll never have to vote again. Sir, what did you mean by that? I know what I take from that, but I don't know what other people took from that. But I don't think that people understand how this is a party that is very interested in creating more hurdles for people to get to the polls. They want to put in more restrictions around ID requirements for voting. They want to get rid of polling locations. They want to do anything to make it inconvenient to vote. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. And obviously, the next thing that comes to mind for me is healthcare and reproductive rights. Now, Donald Trump, in his previous presidency, put in a few Supreme Court justices that are obviously Republicans, and collectively, they have overturned Roe versus Wade. Now, that means that it has been put into the hands of the states to dictate what the laws are around abortion and what women are doing with their bodies, which could be disastrous. And there's other far deeper implications, which I think for a lot of women, this is the one that was definitely top of mind. For other people, they just didn't give a shit. But even beyond reproductive rights, healthcare, affordable healthcare is on the line. You will often hear people who are MAGA supporters talking bad about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, etc. And what was really alarming to me is I had seen this post, and this man was talking about how he wanted to get rid of Obamacare but keep the Affordable Care Act. And I knew then and there we were doomed because, sir, those are the same thing. So what are you talking about? In addition, I feel like I've ran across people who are all for getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, but also are confused, or maybe they don't know that that's the reason why they were able to stay on their parents' health insurance for so long. So that's concerning. The economy. Now, I think this was the promise that really hooked people. I think people were saying, oh, I was in a much better place financially 4 years ago. And again, it just shows that people are not 100% clear on how this whole thing works. And so the economy that people were benefiting from back then was a direct result of Obama's presidency, meaning the economy we're currently in is a direct result of the last Trump presidency. So everything is kind of like a few years behind. And that's concerning for me that people don't understand that. But then also, Trump has really been talking about his tax breaks. And I mean this in the rudest way possible, but the majority of the people that voted for Donald Trump are not in the tax bracket to benefit from his tax breaks. So make it make sense. Exactly, it don't. Next, the climate, the environmental impact. There's always going to be those people who say they don't believe in climate change. Okay, whatever. There's no changing your mind. Education, student debt relief. Trump has been very clear he wants to get rid of the Department of Education. And in addition, the Republicans have done everything that they could during Biden's presidency to block any type of student debt relief. So, if you thought that that was going to magically come to be under Donald Trump, it's not. Cool. LGBTQ plus rights and inclusivity, very clear. Like, Trump is not for the gays, okay? He's very, very clear on that. Like, you can't question that. And then immigration reform, this one blew my mind because when I was looking at like the statistics of who voted for Donald Trump, and I think it was like a very alarming percent of Latino men, which, to be clear, I know that Latino, Hispanic people, they are not the only ones who are immigrants. But it's just confusing to me because why would that be what you voted for when he clearly again said one thing about Donald Trump is he doesn't try to hide what it is he wants to do. He gets on stage and he's very clear and says with his chest what his intentions are. With that being said, he said on day one of his presidency, he wants to do a mass deportation. And I understand that there's a lot of people who think, oh, he wants to deport the criminals that are illegally here in the United States. And I think people think, oh, I'm not a criminal. I haven't done anything illegal to go to jail. And it's like, if you're here illegally, he's literally talking about you. You being here is the crime. And even if you are not here illegally, you probably know someone. It could be your grandma, it could be your friends, aunts, uncles, cousins. Like, I don't understand how you hear that and then you say, yes, let's do it, love it. Crazy. But also, I'm very aware that most of the Republicans are white people and, they really are voting for themselves and what they think is their best interest. They're not thinking about voting for the greater good or for the collective, which is really disheartening. And lastly, what's at stake here is definitely support for marginalized communities. Like, if you're not a white man, I mean, I'm confused. I don't know really how you're going to benefit from this presidency. And some of the people who voted for this outcome are going to be the ones who are hit the hardest with whatever comes of this presidency. And so the people who thought they were voting for a better life, they were voting for more opportunities, actually just voted against the very policies that could have helped them. So at this point, they might as well just go ahead and start a GoFundMe because they're probably going to have better luck with that. Now, with that being said, I am not opposed to taking a step back. The project manager in me loves a retrospective, loves to see where did this all go wrong. And so I have my own opinions, thoughts, ideas of what went wrong in the Democratic campaign this time around. But I also would like to hear other people's opinions. Like, where did it go wrong for you if you didn't vote for Kamala Harris? And if you did, what are your thoughts on like what went wrong? Because for me, I think one of the number one things, in my opinion, that went wrong is I think that the messaging was too complex and it wasn't clear enough for most people. And what I mean by that is that one of the things that I stand by, especially like when it comes to work and my job, is that you should speak in a way, or you should be able to speak in a way where you can explain the most complex topics to the dumbest person in the room. I think that the Democrats sometimes are way too smart for their own good. Like, they need to work on having messaging that's more straightforward, more accessible to everyday people, and it needs to be really geared to the broadest range of voters. And the policies that they have are always super well thought out, but they're always presented in a way that requires voters to really dig for information or to already be politically informed. And most people don't want to go and do their own research, unfortunately. And so I think that they really just need to work on a clear, digestible message and way to get across the policies. I think that they need to make sure that whoever they're speaking to understands how that policy is going to benefit them specifically. So if you're talking to Black people, women, Hispanic people, you need to have a simple, clear message for them on how these specific policies are going to benefit them. Don't have a message that people need to translate or try to figure out. It needs to make sense to them. It needs to make sense to their life. And I think most of what went wrong was around the whole communication and messaging, but I think there were some other things that I kind of noticed. Like, I think that they really struggled to keep like the loyalty of like working class people. And I think that had to do a lot with failure to address like the economic anxiety directly. Like, they kind of skated around it, they hinted at it, they didn't say exactly what their plan was and what exactly they were going to do and when they were going to do it by and what people could expect and how it was going to benefit them. People wanted to hear that gas and groceries were going to go down. That's it. Honestly, they probably didn't even care how you got there. That's what they wanted to hear. In addition, back to messaging, I think that the campaign really focused on campaigning around why Donald Trump was bad and why the Republicans are bad. And although that type of campaigning it does have a place. It cannot be the only strategy to win the presidency. I think that they really focused on January 6th, which, let me be clear, should have been a deal breaker for literally everyone. The fact that it wasn't is honestly scary, but they wanted to really just hone in on that instead of helping people understand, okay, Donald Trump is bad, the Republicans are bad. What does a future with Kamala Harris look like? What does this mean for my everyday life? What am I going to get out of this presidency? In addition, one thing that they did really well is marketing towards Gen Z and millennials, using and diving really deep into social media and online campaigning, even using like influencers, celebrities, things like that to really market to that group. But I think that they over relied on that. And I think because they did that, they kind of didn't focus on the older groups. So people that are 50 and up, that aren't on social media or don't know who Meg Stallion is, like they kind of didn't focus on the traditional media to really get in good with those older voters. So I think if they would have found like a better balance with that, maybe that could have been helpful. I also think maybe they got too comfortable in like those battleground states, ones that haven't been voting Republican for a long time. They didn't really focus on those areas. And then lastly, I feel like they didn't give moderate voters or undecided voters a place. Like they really focused on really progressive ideas, which I'm all for that. I am very progressive. Like I am here for progressive ideas. And I know that those are essential to the party. But I think there has to be a balance in that messaging, or people who are moderate or undecided feel like they don't have a place. Like they feel caught between two extremes. And that can be a turnoff for some people, unfortunately. I think with progressive policies, they didn't do a good job of explaining that in a more moderate term. So, Medicare for all, free college, they needed to frame those progressive policies in a way that resonated better with moderate or undecided voters. They want to be reassured that, like, whatever changes you're going to make are going to be gradual. They're going to consider my needs, and they don't want it to be a hard and abrupt shift. The campaign should have brought more progressive and moderate voters together in like a unified voice. And what I mean by that is, for example, I love Bernie Sanders. Like, I would vote for Bernie Sanders in a heartbeat. He's super progressive. I'm here for it. And throughout the whole campaign, he got on board with Kamala. He was supporting her. He was advocating for her. He was encouraging people to vote for her. And then as soon as she lost, he shitted on the entire campaign publicly, like literally the night of the election. And I get it. Like, I agree with some of the things that he was saying, but I think if you are undecided or moderate and, 4 years from now, you remember that, it's like, can I really even trust him next time? Because he was on board telling me to vote for this group, but then as soon as they lost, he said every bad thing about them in the book. So I think they just needed to figure that out. I'm very aware that people vote based on their everyday lives, their hopes, their worries, their families, the things that matter to them. And so it's important for the party to create a vision that resonates with people on a very surface level, and it tells them exactly how their life is going to get better under this presidency. And I really think they dropped the ball there, unfortunately. Now, moving on. The last Donald Trump presidency was a effing nightmare, okay? Like, I feel like people that voted for him were like, here, hold my drink. I'm ready for the biggest fucking reality show plot twist. And I feel like that message was very loud and clear that people don't care about the president having integrity, being honest, or even just having basic decency. Um, and like when I think about it in the grand scheme of things, I can't believe that that was even optional. Like, I can't believe that January 6th wasn't a deal breaker. And I always just think about like the shit that Trump does, the shit that he says, the way that he acts, the way that he behaves. He is a literal psychopath. Just imagine, okay, if Obama behaved in that way. They would have just completely ripped that man apart. He would never be able to show his face on Capitol Hill again. Like, it never would have happened. They would have impeached him, got him out of office immediately. It never would have been accepted. And it is so insane to me that people said, I genuinely do not care that you called your supporters to literally show up at the Capitol and act like fucking terrorists. We want you back. Love it. Can't wait. However, 92% of Black women fought for every single marginalized group. And when it came down to it, millions of people decided to sell out for the price of eggs. And I think what was most disappointing to me when I was just reflecting and thinking about that is like, if you're a Black person, you know, you're always taught and it's drilled into your head almost since birth. You have to be twice as good to get half of what they have. They, meaning white people. And you always hold on to that. You always believe that. And you always work with that in the back of your mind. And so seeing the results of this election basically kind of shattered that for me. Like, it showed me that even if you are overqualified, you're 10 times better, you obviously deserve the job or whatever it is, there's always going to be an inadequate, incapable, crazy white man that still could get the job. And like, what a slap in the face. Like, what the fuck was that? Like, oh my God. I'm just stressed. I'm stressed thinking about it. Anyways, with that being said, as for me and my house, and also what I encourage everyone else who is feeling like I'm feeling after this election, is we're entering our self-preservation era. And for anyone who voted for Donnie, well, good luck. You're going to need it. And honestly, I'm not nice. So I hope you get exactly what you voted for. I have a few plans for the next 4 years that I am going to share. So feel free to take what you need or at least think about coming up with your own plan of how you're going to survive the next 4 years. Okay, so first things first, I'm taking care of myself first before anything and anyone else. I'm stepping back, I'm prioritizing myself. Everyone else can handle their own mess. I always do my best to be a part of any social movement that I believe in. I'm not doing that anymore. Those are a them issue, not a me issue. I am going to focus on my own happiness, my own growth, my own mental health, and I'm just not carrying the weight of anything that does not belong to me. I'm going to take care of my mental health. I already know it's going to be stressful in itself living through another chaotic political cycle. Like, this isn't even a joke. And it's okay if you're feeling that way. Um, protect your peace. That should be your number one priority. Meditate, journal, exercise, do whatever you need, whatever works for you. I also really need to work on this, but I think it should be good for anyone to do this, but unplug when you need to. Like, just because the chaos is loud, that doesn't mean you have to listen to it 24/7. And I'm speaking to myself. Like, set boundaries with the news and social media. Like, it's okay to tune it out for the sake of your sanity. Like, I know we all get FOMO, but sometimes it can just be too much, Like, I just want to focus on my people, my happiness, my future. And honestly, I'm just rooting for every single person who stood on the right side of history. In addition, I think these next 4 years are really a good time to brush up on your knowledge of your rights and knowing your rights, understanding what they are when it comes to voting, healthcare, employment, run ins with the police, any type of legal protections. Like, do your research, understand, and know what your rights look like. Um, and build community. Like, I think things like this are really hard to kind of navigate on your own. So find people that are like minded, that have the same morals, values, beliefs as you, but also who can challenge your perspectives, help you see things from a different point of view, and connect with them, share resources with them, and lean on those people. And lastly, which this I actually was planning to do before the election, but I think the results of the election will kind of speed that up for me. If you can, which I know everyone cannot pick up tomorrow and move to a new state, but if you can and you're serious about, living in a place that aligns more with your beliefs, which in return will help you find the community that I was talking about, because you'll know that there's people there that kind of value the same things that you do. Do your research, figure out, where you would be interested in moving to. Obviously, for me, that's going to be a blue state. I have a few in mind. Consider the cost of living, the job market, all of those things. You got to find housing. And some blue states can be pricey, so take that into consideration. So whatever that means, even if you can't move, if it's just making a plan to move, figuring out how you can save up to move, I highly, highly encourage it. All right. So this was a difficult episode to get through, but nonetheless, we're here, and I know it feels heavy for many people, and I know it's not going to be something that we get over overnight. Sit with it as long as you need to. That's what I'm doing. It's disappointing, it's frustrating, it's honestly exhausting. So, like I said, let's just focus on ourselves, our own mental health, our own communities, and take a step back from everything else. But before we wrap up, I do have a little challenge for you guys. So, if you're listening to this and you voted for Kamala Harris, I want to know why. But on the other side, if you voted for Donald Trump, I also want to know why. Like, how did you come up with that decision? And in addition to that, if you voted down the ticket Democrat and then you chose Donald Trump as the president, please explain, because I genuinely cannot wrap my head around that thought process. I'm not one of those people who are like, oh, I'll vote for who I like. No, I vote Democrat down the ballot every time, because I know that in order for a Democratic president to be successful, they also have to have Democratic majority in Congress. So I don't waver from that. But it was clear during this election, a lot of people did. and I want to know how you got there. With that being said, I want to keep the conversation going. I would love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on the election in the comments. Share any resources you have. I'm going to put a long list of different podcasts and sources that I like to listen to and that I use to do my research. I'll leave that in the show notes of this episode. And if you're still watching, please make sure that you subscribe. If you are on YouTube, leave a comment, like, turn on your notifications. If you are listening on any podcast platform, leave a review, share it with a friend, whatever you need to share the show. Follow us on Instagram as well as TikTok at The Subjective Podcast. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Okay, bye.